what it means to have this kind of support. We have been dismissed, we have been ignored, and we have been ridiculed. So for all of you to be here means so much. I also want to thank Kimberly for the humbling introduction. Thank you. Also to Vaccine Choice Canada, Freedom Rising, and the Canada Health Alliance, thank you for your support in these initiatives. And I would also like to thank TVOF, Taking Back Our Freedoms, for giving me the opportunity to tell my story in the first place. I would like to actually introduce myself. My name is Meredith Klitsky, and I am vaccine injured. I know it sounds more like an introduction at an AA meeting, but this has been by far the most sobering experience of my life. I would like to qualify my previous statement. More realistically, I should say that I am experimental gene therapy injured, but it doesn't seem to have the same impact. When I say this has been sobering, it is because my life and my world have been completely shattered. Not only dealing with roughly 30 different physical symptoms, but this has also been my year of awakening. And I know most of you know what that means. Not only has this been physically debilitating, but it's been psychologically overwhelming. Because of the lack of recognition of vaccine injuries, you are forced to research everything on your own. It is because of this research that my eyes have finally been opened. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that every one of us, as Kimberly has mentioned, have lost something. We have all suffered. But we must first and foremost recognize those who have paid the ultimate price. They have lost their lives. Whether it be from the experimental gene therapies, illness, neglect and isolation, horrific hospital protocols, suicide or overdose, or many other reasons, we must always remember and provide support to the families that must bear this unimaginable pain. These are the losses that will never be remedied. There are so many types of loss that these experimental gene therapies, the mandates, the overall pandemic response has created, and not one of us has been spared. Families have been torn apart, lifelong friendships destroyed, careers terminated, the complete loss of trust in all of our institutions, and for those of us who are vaccine injured, the loss of the person we once were, and the creation of an immense fear of what will become of us. I want to give you a glimpse into what this experience has been like. At the beginning, when the vaccines, quote, first came out, my gut told me, no way. I didn't trust it. I knew there wasn't enough information. But as time went on, I was faced with a bit of a health scare. As it turned out, it was nothing I needed to be concerned about. But at the time, it was pushed on me that I was immunocompromised and that the best decision for me would be to be vaccinated. The relentless pressure from family, from the media, because of course at the time I was still relying on mainstream media for information. Little did I know at the time they were merely propaganda outlets for our government. But the one thing that really pushed me over the edge was a very, very, very close family friend I had known since childhood. She was one of my mother's best friends, and when my mom passed away, she became my little mom, And I say my little mom because she was a tiny little bit of a thing. We met for lunch one day in June of 2021. We met outside on a patio, and when I sat down, the first question out of her mouth was, "Have you got your second vaccine?"
Beautiful.
And I said to her, "I haven't got my first." And she looked at me with utter disgust. She said to me, "I can't believe I am here with you. How could you be so irresponsible? If my husband knew I was here, I would not be allowed to see my grandchildren." I was shocked. I was mortified. I was embarrassed. But our lunch continued, but it was very tense. She proceeded to tell me throughout our lunch that her stepson was a doctor, her sister was an ICU nurse, and went on with the stories and just continued to push that fear that all of these institutions and organizations have pushed on us for the last 2.5 years. I trusted this woman. I valued this woman. Like I said, she was a second mom. When we left that lunch, the emails started. She sent me this study and that study and this information and that information to push me to make this decision. It made me question myself. It made me question my own judgment. I thought, maybe I was wrong. She continued to the point that I broke down, and I made the appointment. And I went, and I got my first shot. I didn't think about it at the time. In hindsight, there were some small things that I experienced, but again, at the time, I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I phoned her, almost seeking approval. Like, guess what? I did it. Now you can be proud of me. She asked me, "When are you going for your second?" My appointment was automatically booked for me for 2 months later. I told her this. She said, "Oh, you can cancel that and reschedule. They're now doing it within a 4-week interval." I said, "Thanks, but no thanks. I'm good to wait." Over the course of that 2 months, I don't know how many times I said to my husband, let me take this moment to acknowledge my husband and my son. They're not here tonight, but without their support, I don't know that I would be either. So I just want to recognize them and tell them that I love them. I went for my second appointment, ironically, on Friday, August the 13th of 2021. And within 2 weeks, my life was turned upside down. After that 2 weeks, I began with a barrage of different symptoms. Painful, scary, physical symptoms, neurological symptoms. As I previously mentioned, I started to experience close to 30 different things. I made a list of all of the things that had changed within myself, and the list just continued to grow. I'm not going to go into detail about every single one, but I'll just give you an overview. As far as the neurological issues, I have tremors and vibrations in the left side of my head and spasms that can be so bad at times. I have excruciating pain in my left ear. My left ear has been plugged for over a year, and I also suffer from tinnitus in my left ear. I deal with brain fog. I lose my train of thought, and I have difficulty finding my words sometimes. So please, if that happens to me this evening, bear with me. I get stabbing pains in the top of my head that can last for days, and pressure, immense pressure in the left side of my head and my face. This might be too much information, but my menstrual cycle completely stopped. I realize I'm at that age, but to go from completely normal periods to post-menopausal with 0 symptoms seems a little bit suspect. And to navigate the medical system, you are passed from one to the next and dismissed at every turn. I also deal with muscle spasms all throughout the left side of my body, my leg in particular. I lose feeling in my left hand and my left foot, and I deal with pins and needles sensations all the time. So those are just a few of the things that I experience. Oh, the exhaustion. I understand the exhaustion. It's not fun when you're pushing a cart through the grocery store and you have to stop and you have to sit on the floor because you can no longer support your own weight. And people look at you as if you're strange. I reached out to my family doctor. I reached out to this family friend who couldn't even be bothered to return my phone calls. So I don't even know to this day that she even knows what I'm dealing with. My family doctor, oh, the oral issues. That's actually one of the worst. I've been diagnosed with something that they call burning mouth syndrome. And yes, it's about as pleasant as it sounds. It is like my lips have been sliced with razor blades and are being burned with a flame. My mouth burns on a constant basis. At the beginning, I lost 25 pounds because I could not eat. Everything was spicy. Everything burned. It was like I was sitting, I might as well have sat and ate a bowl of Tabasco sauce. I could do nothing but sit and suck on ice cubes just to try and deal with the pain. My family doctor, oh, also the swelling. There's swelling in my lips. I will all of a sudden, my bottom lip will explode, or they will go beet red. I will shed layers of skin off my mouth. I see a dermatologist. I have for years, just for spots that I get because of the sun. My family doctor, when I approached her, told me to talk to him about it. So I did. He told me I had contact dermatitis, that I needed to see an allergist. So off to the allergist I went. After thorough allergy testing, 80 patches on my back, days of discomfort, I knew I didn't have an allergy, but I knew I had no option but to go through all of their testing and jump through their hoops. The allergist found that I had a mild sensitivity to something called Carbamix, which is an ingredient in rubber products, but he said that would manifest itself on my hands, and he said he wouldn't even classify it as an allergy. He said he would go as far as to say is what you are dealing with is not an allergy, but he wouldn't elaborate. When I followed up with my dermatologist, because he was the one who sent the referral, he wanted to do a biopsy. Well, when your mouth is burned and inflamed and raw, the last thing you want is somebody to take a chunk out of them. I said no. He said okay. He had already prescribed me 3 different creams, which did not work. The allergist gave me a cream, which did not work. He said, well, I don't know what else to do. So I asked him, when should I book my next appointment? Because I would regularly go, once a year. He looked at me and he said, if you need to come back, if something comes up, have your doctor send another referral. He dismissed me from his practice. My dentist was the next. She looked at my mouth. She couldn't see anything. She prescribed something called magic mouthwash, which is a combination of an antibacterial, an antifungal, a steroid, and lidocaine. The lidocaine numbed my mouth for a period of time, but once that wore off, I was right back to the horrendous discomfort. When I went to get that prescription filled, I had to go to a compounding pharmacy. When I went in, I was at the time having a terrible episode of inflammation and swelling in my mouth. The pharmacist asked me what I was dealing with, and I showed him, and he looked with shock. And I said, I told him that I had had numerous creams and nothing was working. He asked what the creams were, and I told him, and he looked at me with shock and said to me, "They told you to put those on your mouth?" And I said, yes. So needless to say, my faith in the medical institution is gone. I have no trust. When I reached back out to my dentist, because she said, if this doesn't work, let me know, she never even returned my phone calls. I was sent to a neurologist who did an assessment, just an assessment in his office, no testing. He told me that I was suffering from something called complex migraine syndrome. I thought to myself, I know what a migraine is. I have suffered with periodic migraines since I was a child. I was not experiencing migraines. He said, oh, research it. It's a syndrome. It's a phenomena. When I looked into it, nothing that I read described what I was experiencing. He, of course, prescribed another prescription, something that was meant to cross the blood-brain barrier, which at that point I had learned the experimental gene therapies also did. I chose not to fill that prescription because I didn't want to do any more neurological damage than had already been done. So this just reinforces that they have no idea how to deal with vaccine injuries, and they just choose to pass the buck. I got to read his report that he sent to my family doctor, and one of the comments he made was that I had anxiety and that I was, quote, preoccupied with my issues that were caused by the vaccine. These are the type of responses we get from the medical community. Anxiety. I have suffered from anxiety and depression throughout my life. That's not what this is. As far as the anxiety diagnosis or suggestion goes, I'd like to bring people's attention to something called Medscape. A doctor that I know sent me a link. Medscape is an organization or an outlet for doctors and nurses. It's a continuing education platform. They provide research and message boards, and physicians and medical professionals can communicate and discuss certain things. Well, it was a link to a message board on this website. Of course, you have to be a licensed medical professional to report on this site. The title of the message board was, "How concerned are you about adverse events related to the vaccines?" To me, that's open to interpretation, and only the author knows. Was it a question of, are you as physicians concerned for your patients, or are you concerned for yourselves? In going through the messages that were posted on this message board, 99% of them are from medical professionals discussing their own adverse events. This is merely a fraction of the pages. I printed a few because one of the comments were that our posts are being removed. This isn't even all of the replies to the comments that have been made, and I have not, to this day, found the end of this message board. Sorry. So not only do we deal with these responses from our medical professionals, but there are the responses from family and friends when you tell them what you're experiencing. I get responses like, oh, things happen to our bodies as we get older. Oh, I've had 2 or 3 shots and I'm fine. Or a good one is, must be long COVID. A family member said that to me, and I said, no, it's called a vaccine injury. We haven't spoken since. I have a friend back home in Brantford. She is also vaccine injured. I almost feel guilty discussing my symptoms when I think about Cindy. She has horrendous convulsions. A couple of weeks ago, she ended up on the side of the road, her body completely seized, shaking horrendously. I have never seen anything like it. She has gone by ambulance to our hospital, where she has been told she has anxiety. Take some lorazepam, go home. They have tried to admit her to mental health. But the worst one was they accused her of being on methamphetamines. A friend of hers actually made her a shirt that says, I am not on meth, I am vaccine injured. Nobody needs to explain something like that. And there is no way anybody should be treated like this. Her last call to the paramedics, when they asked what she was dealing with, she told them. They didn't even come. They told her to wait it out at home. There's a wonderful young lady whose name is Carolyn Pover. She is also vaccine injured. And she wrote a book called The COVID Vaccine Adverse Reaction Survival Guide. She spoke at the Better Way conference from the World Council for Health. She asked some really good questions. She questioned where the compassion and understanding in our society has gone. She said, since when do we counter someone's suffering with positive things in our own lives? She made some excellent points. She said, do we respond to someone who has had a miscarriage? Oh, but I have 3 healthy children. Or someone who is a victim of domestic violence. Oh, my partner is wonderful and kind and gentle. We have never responded to someone's illness, trauma, or pain in such a fashion. When have support groups had their accounts suspended or removed from social media just for discussing the horrors that they are experiencing? Or have you heard of people infiltrating support groups to tell the victims that we deserve what has happened to us for being so stupid? I never had social media. I always realized there was such a negative aspect to it. But once I started to experience this, I felt the need to reach out. I opened my first Twitter account where I would discuss what I was going through. I would put up posts about living in fear every day because, as we know, there are no long-term studies as to what the effects of these injections are. Nor do we know, as a vaccine-injured person, what our future holds. We have no idea what is going to happen long-term. And to make a post like that, to be replied to with a comment such as, I deserve to live in fear every day, and that they hope I suffer every day. It makes it evident that this whole COVID narrative has stripped people of their compassion. We can also see this in how the unvaccinated have been treated. Take the words of our so-called Prime Minister, or the infamous front page of the Toronto Star, or social media posts with pictures of people with signs that read, quote, "Gas the unvaccinated." What happened to our society as a whole? One thing I would like to go back to, the woman that I trusted, my second mom. She did reach out to me in November of last year. She asked if I would meet her for a drink. She was taking her car in, so she needed something to do in the meantime. I said thank you, but no thank you. By this point, the dreaded passport